Welcome to another topic under the subject professional ethics. This time we are going to tackle about moral problems. Let's take a look at the objective of the lesson. First, to distinguish the different problems confronting morals which are relevant to the area of computing. And second, differentiate the four types of moral problems in the field of computing. And what is that four types? First, we have moral principle. Second, scope of morality. Third, moral obligations. And lastly, we have moral freedom. As we must know by now, connected to the study of ethics is the study of moral problems. In this lesson, we shall consider four types of moral problems that are relevant to the area of computing. So to start with, we will be discussing first the problem of moral principle. Human beings search for a guiding method, a standard, or principle that they can employ in making good decisions and right choices pursuit of the good life. However, as we can deduce from the various theories of ethics, there is no single standard or moral principle that defines good decisions, right choices, and moral actions. Consider this situation. You are a computer specialist employed in the human resource department of a hospital. As such, you are responsible for safekeeping and updating the computer records of employees. The documents under your custody are highly confidential in nature and should not be made accessible to ordinary employees of the hospital. One day, a friend, who is also an employee of the hospital, requests personal information about the doctor that he is thinking of prosecuting. Your dilemma is whether to grant your friend's request and hence violate your duty to uphold the confidentiality of employee records, or not to grant the same, and hence arouse your friend's anger. If you opt for the former, it is a tantamount to a breach of trust and confidence. On the other hand, if you opt not to disclose the information, your friendship might be severed. Should you choose the first option on the basis of the argument that it will result in greater happiness than pain? Or you may be following a moral principle called utilitarianism. Your decision, however, may be questioned by yet another moral principle that focuses not on happy consequences but on intention, or by another that focuses neither on happy consequences nor on intention but on the character of the person doing the action. The problem, therefore, lies in the question of which among the different moral principles is to be followed. Furthermore, even after choosing a moral principle, its reliability may still be questioned. Let's take a look at the problem of the scope of morality. A moral principle should serve as a guide for making moral choices. But how do individuals determine which among their choices are moral and which are not? The problem of the scope of morality deals with this question. It delineates morality, identifying what includes and what it excludes. Consider these two scenarios. First, let's take a look with scenario letter A. One day, Juan bought several copies of pirated software. He then set up a stall and proceeded to sell the copies he had bought. He did the pirated software and displayed licensed copies, but always hinted at buyers that he had cheaper versions of the software available. Let's take a look at the scenario B. One day, you decide to try out new software in financial accounting. we discover that the flaws software has many flaws. Which of the two is a matter of moral concern? Well, guys, it's up to you to think about. Let's take a look at the problem of the moral obligation. What is the so-called moral obligation? When we say moral obligation, it is a duty of responsibility someone feels honor bound to perform because of personal beliefs and values. This concept explored in the fields like philosophy, ethics, and psychology, where people are interested in the origins of human behavior and the roots of the decision-making process. Two sources of moral obligation. So first, we have the law-based moral obligations. Good citizens have a moral as well as legal obligation to abide by laws. It is part of the assumed social contract of a civilized society. We have the second one, agreement-based moral obligation. Even if an agreement doesn't reach the level of an enforceable contract, there is moral obligation to do the things you agree to do, especially if others are counting on you to do so. For example, if one student tried to borrow money to another student and he promised to pay that student whom he borrowed the money with, then he has the moral obligation to pay that certain amount on the day he promised to pay that. There is no a legal basis for that, but there is a moral obligation that he is going to pay that student on that particular day. When you made a promise, therefore, you are going to make that promise in reality. It simply says that promises are not meant to be broken, but instead it is to be done. As social begins, individuals act in accordance with the dictates of society. Conflict arises when what an individual wants to do is the reverse of what he or she ought to do as a member of the society. In this case, the problem is one of the conflicting moral obligations to oneself and to the society at large. To illustrate this, you are a prominent professor in a computer school. In one of the classes in computer programming that you are handling, you call on a student whose name sounds familiar. You remember that it is the name of your former philosophy teacher who gave you a very hard time before finally giving you a grade of 3.0. When you ask the student who is his father, he confirms that your former philosophy teacher is his father. Over the next few weeks, you contemplate making things difficult for the student in vindication of the hardship you experienced under his father. But it turns out that the student is the smartest student in your computer class. In this case, you are confronted with two conflicting moral obligations. First, the desire to avenge yourself and your moral obligation as a teacher to give students the grade that they deserve. Another example would be a computer programmer who is being asked by his employer to create a program that would sabotage a competitor's computer system. The computer programmer's dilemma is whether to follow the employer's order or refuse it, which refusal might cost him his job. The two conflicting obligations here are the person's obligation to his employer and his obligation to play fair. Let's take a look at the problem of freedom. The problem of freedom is twofold. First, or one, if human beings are free, then there must be no morality. Two, if human beings are not free, then there must be morality. The former suggests that every action is but a unique expression of oneself, and no action is moral or immoral, right or wrong, good or bad. The latter stresses the fact that where there exists a recognition of the rights of others, there will always be a set of criteria of standards of morality on which actions shall be based. The problem of freedom is reflected in the saying, your rights end at the tip of your nose, or your rights end at the tip of my nose. Meaning, you can do anything you want as long as you do not infringe on the rights of other people. This is the irony of limited freedom. For example, in computing, users are free to explore and stuff websites and operate applications for as long as they do not commit acts that are considered unlawful. In this, the computer user's freedom is not boundless. So that ends, guys, our discussion regarding moral principles. Please do stand by for the another movie presentation of the another lesson, which is computer abuses, which will tackle about the different computer abuses that are found in the society nowadays. To give a brief example of what are these computer abuses, let's take a look first about, or let's discuss first about the computer ethics to further understand the computer abuses, or why these things become abusive to computers. So computer ethics will be discussed in our next video presentation, followed by computer abuses. So please do stand by for the upload of the next lessons. Good day.